Hi, my name's Natalie, and the day my father died, my mother looked me in the eyes and said, "Don't worry, sweetie. You don't have to think about a thing. I'll handle everything." She said it with a smile, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes, the kind that means something entirely different than what the words suggest. Back then, I believed her. What else could I do? I was grieving, still in shock. My father, the only person who had ever seen me, was gone. And the house suddenly felt colder, like even the walls didn't know what to say. They buried him on a Wednesday. It rained. Of course it did. Everyone said it was fitting, like he'd orchestrated the weather just to match the mood. My mother wore black, carried tissues in a lace clutch, and cried exactly twice. Once when the casket lowered, and once when the family lawyer mentioned my name. Not because she missed me, but because she realized she'd have to figure out how to get around the will. The reading happened 2 days later. Her kitchen still smelled like lemon polish and stale casseroles. The lawyer sat stiffly at the breakfast table, his leather briefcase resting against a chair leg like it might try to escape. My older brother Michael leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, eyes darting toward Mom every time the lawyer opened his mouth. I sat across from them, still in my funeral dress. I hadn't had the energy to change. He read the will, my father's voice, suddenly alive in cold legal words, his wishes, printed in black and white. I leave the house and all primary financial holdings to my daughter, Natalie Ann Carter, with the express wish that she use them to build the life I know she's capable of. I didn't breathe. Neither did my mother. Michael muttered something under his breath, but I didn't catch it. I was too busy trying to convince myself that I heard correctly. I looked at the lawyer. He nodded gently, as if confirming yes, this was real. For one strange second, I felt safe, and then she laughed. Low, soft, disbelieving. "Natalie," she said, folding her napkin as if we were discussing side dishes. "Your father was under a lot of stress near the end. You know how the medications affected his memory." I blinked. "What?" She reached over and touched my hand. Warm, soft, practiced. "This isn't how we're going to do things. I'll talk to Mr. Foster privately. I'm going to handle the estate for now. It's too much for you." "I'm not a child," I whispered. "No, but you've never been responsible with money. You barely made it through school. You bounce from job to job. You're not ready to manage something like this." I looked at Mr. Foster. He shifted in his seat. "Mrs. Carter," he began carefully. "Legally," she smiled wider. "Legally, my daughter is grieving, and legally she's not in the mental state to make sound decisions, so we'll be filing a temporary transfer of fiduciary authority, for now." Michael finally spoke. "It's for your own good, Nat. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I should have screamed. I should have flipped the table, burned the house down, recorded everything and run straight to the courts. But I didn't. I just sat there, surrounded by people who were supposed to be my family, and realized something bone deep. This was never about grief. It was about control. That night, I packed my things. Not that I had much. A box of books, a duffel of clothes, the envelope with the will, my copy, the one Dad gave me weeks before he died and told me to keep safe just in case. I didn't say goodbye. She didn't ask where I was going. But before I left, I stood outside her bedroom door and listened. "I told you it'd be easy," she was saying. "She always folds." Michael's voice. "We should have done it sooner. That account's almost dry." Then silence. And in that silence, something in me changed. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I just rewrote the ending in my mind. They thought I'd disappear. They thought I'd stay gone. They had no idea I was about to become the worst mistake they ever made. The first place I lived after leaving my mother's house was a half-finished attic above a stranger's garage. The rent was cheap because the windows didn't close properly, and the pipes moaned at night like ghosts with nowhere left to haunt. There was mold behind the mini-fridge and an exposed beam that nearly knocked me out twice before I learned to duck. But it was mine. I didn't tell anyone where I went. I didn't even leave a forwarding address. The moment I stepped out of that house, I decided two things. No one was going to save me, and I would never again put my future in someone else's hands, especially not hers. What I didn't realize back then was that my mother hadn't just stolen my inheritance. She'd built an entire illusion around it, one that would take years to untangle. It started with the bank. 2 weeks after I left, I tried to access the account my father had set up for me when I was a teenager. It wasn't much. Just a few $1,000s he'd deposited over the years in small amounts. Birthday money, graduation gifts. In case you ever want to go somewhere they can't follow, he'd joked once, handing me the deposit slip. That account was supposed to be mine alone, but the teller shook her head and said the name had been removed. Excuse me? I asked, blinking at the screen. It was converted into a joint account with a guardian's authorization form. I felt my stomach drop. What guardian? Looks like your mother. She tapped something on the keyboard. And then 2 weeks ago, the account was closed. I didn't cry. I just nodded, walked out of the bank, and sat in my car so still I felt like I might disappear. She didn't just take what my father left me. She erased my name from it. She made it look like I never existed in the first place. By the time I found a job, a temp admin gig at a local courthouse, the utilities in my garage loft had been shut off twice. I lived off cold granola bars and instant coffee. But the courthouse? That place became my education. I watched divorces implode in quiet hearing rooms. I filed injunctions, restraining orders, last-minute will contests. I sat behind glass and took notes while people cried over contracts and custody and the cost of being the one who loved more. And I listened to how people lose power, to how they get it back, to what happens when someone signs something they don't understand, like I did that day my mother slid the clarification form across the table and told me it was just to make sure the lawyer can communicate directly with her. I'd signed it because I was grieving, because I didn't know better, because I wanted, stupidly, to still believe she cared. One day, I was logging new case files when I saw a familiar last name in the docket queue. Michael Carter, my brother. It was a traffic citation. He'd been pulled over in a car registered under my father's name, still active somehow, despite the estate being settled. And worse, he used it to apply for a private business loan 6 months earlier, a loan that defaulted. There was a lien on the house. I printed every document I could find and took them home, spread them across my floor like puzzle pieces, trying to make sense of how deep the hole was. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance. They'd used my father's identity, after death, to fund Michael's failing ventures, and then signed documents under the family trust, a trust I hadn't known even existed, because they never filed it through probate. They'd bypassed the courts. I wasn't supposed to find out. 2 nights later, I called the last person in the world I thought I'd ever need again. Hi, this is Mrs. Reyes. Mrs. Reyes, it's Natalie Carter. A pause. Oh my goodness. Are you okay? Her voice cracked. She'd been my high school English teacher, the only one who ever saw through my silences. She once gave me a copy of the bell jar with a note that said, "Don't drown quietly." I need a favor, I said. Anything. Do you still talk to your niece, the one in law school? She hesitated. She graduated last year, passed the bar. Why? Because I'm going to war, and I need someone who knows how to read a financial corpse. We met 3 days later in a coffee shop that smelled like burnt cinnamon. Her name was Vanessa, sharp in both mind and tone, and the kind of woman who wore black like it was armor. I liked her immediately. She flipped through the documents, eyes scanning fast. They forged 3 signatures here, she said flatly. If this is legit, you've got a case. I asked her the question that had been keeping me up every night. Do I press charges now or wait? Vanessa closed the folder. You wait, because if you're going to burn the house down, you need to make sure they're still inside when you light the match. I never expected her to call. The number flashed on my phone one afternoon while I was standing in line at a dry cleaner's, holding a crumpled blazer in one hand and a coffee that had long since gone cold in the other. Mom. I hadn't spoken to her in years. She didn't even know where I lived. I stared at the screen until the call went to voicemail, then stood there, completely still, as if not answering was somehow an act of resistance strong enough to undo everything. Then the message came through. Natalie, it's me. I know it's been a long time, but I'd like to see you. We miss you. Maybe dinner next week? I'll cook your favorite. No pressure, just family. No pressure, just family. The words tasted like rust. I didn't reply for 3 days. When I finally did, I kept it short. Next Thursday, 7 p.m. I showed the text to Vanessa as we sat in her office, the case files spread out between us like landmines. You sure you're ready for this? She asked. I didn't answer immediately. Just looked at the image she'd found that morning, a scanned property deed transferring the house title from the trust to my mother's name, using a notary who'd lost their license 5 years before the signature date. She thinks I'm still the girl who cried when she changed the locks, I said finally. She's expecting silence. I'm bringing mirrors. Vanessa nodded. Then let's turn up the lights. The house looked the same. Too much the same, actually. Same brick steps with that faint chip on the right side. Same cracked window pane in the front room, no one ever fixed. The lights were on. The porch had been swept. It all looked curated, like a memory someone had tried to preserve in glass. I rang the doorbell. One chime, then footsteps. She opened the door wearing a warm smile and a pale pink sweater I remembered hating. Her perfume hit me first, sharp, artificial, like nostalgia dipped in bleach. Natalie. She opened her arms but didn't move forward. I didn't hug her. I brought wine, I said, holding up the bottle I'd grabbed from a convenience store on the way. It wasn't good. That was the point. Of course, sweetheart. She stepped aside. Come in. Michael was already at the table. He didn't stand when I walked in, just gave me a half smile, then went back to his phone. Still pretending you don't see people when they're inconvenient? I asked, setting the wine on the counter. Still dramatic, he muttered. I turned to Mom. So, what's this really about? Her smile cracked slightly. Can't a mother want to have dinner with her children? Not when the last thing she said to one of them was, "You should be grateful we let you stay as long as we did." She sighed. I knew this would be hard. No, I said. You knew this would be different. We sat down. The table was set for 3, white napkins, silver trim, and that same chipped china set she always claimed was heirloom, but bought from a clearance sale at Macy's. She ladled out soup like nothing had ever happened. I didn't touch mine. So, Michael said finally, how's your life of exile? I looked at him. Really looked. He'd aged. Not badly, just poorly. Skin too tight around the jaw, eyes darting. That nervous energy of someone whose lies are starting to rot. Good, I said. Quiet, productive. Yours? He shrugged. Ups and downs. Mostly downs, I said. He flinched, just barely. My mother cleared her throat. Michael's been handling a lot. The business is failing, I said, because you used a dead man's name to secure a loan, which defaulted, and put a lien on a house that wasn't legally yours. The silence that followed was instant, solid. Michael set his spoon down hard. I knew you came here with an agenda. No, I said calmly. I came here with evidence. I reached into my bag, pulled out a slim folder, set it down between the soup and the centerpiece. Inside, copies of the forged trust deed, the fraudulent loan documents, the record of misappropriation of estate assets, all sourced and notarized. My mother's voice went flat. You're making a mistake. No, I said. You did? 10 years ago? When you thought I wouldn't fight. Michael stood, chair scraping. This is blackmail. It's discovery, I said. But sure, call it what you want. Why now? My mother whispered. I turned to her. Because I wanted to see how far you'd go. Because I gave you a chance to fix it, and you doubled down. Because I was your daughter, and you still chose greed over blood. She blinked. Natalie, I was just trying to protect what your father built. You didn't know how to handle that kind of money. You still don't. You're playing lawyer now? That's cute. I'm not playing, I said, standing. I brought one. And right on cue, there was a knock at the door. Vanessa stepped in, wearing her sharpest navy suit and holding a formal envelope. Evening, she said. Mrs. Carter, you've been served. The look on my mother's face was almost pitying, but not for herself. For me. That's the moment I realized she truly believed she'd win. Family doesn't do this, she whispered. No, I said, walking toward the door. Family doesn't have to. And then I left. The letter was only the first shot. Over the next week, the legal dominoes began to fall, slow at first, almost casual, then faster. The house, once transferred quietly through forged documents, was flagged for review. A court-appointed investigator froze the associated bank accounts pending judgment. The loan Michael took out under my father's name, the lender demanded immediate repayment or seizure of assets, and for the first time I thought maybe, just maybe, we were winning. Then Vanessa called me one night, her voice tight. Nat, she said, we've got a problem. It was late, past midnight. I was sitting on the floor of my studio apartment, surrounded by sticky notes and scanned files, trying to map out the family trust like it was some lost language carved into stone. What kind of problem? Your mother filed a counterclaim. Of course she did. She's alleging emotional coercion, claims she only signed documents under distress, and that your father, I cut her off, is dead. Convenient target. She's also arguing that the estate was mismanaged from the beginning, that your father was mentally unfit when the trust was amended. Silence. And? Vanessa hesitated. There's a witness backing her up. Someone who claims your father changed his mind about leaving you everything before he died, says he told them directly, says he wanted things split equally. I already knew, before she said it. It's Aunt Julia, isn't it? Julia was my father's sister, not blood, she married in. But close enough. She was the one who baked cookies on snow days and taught me how to fold hospital corners on bed sheets. She used to call me Starshine, the nickname nobody else got to use. And I hadn't heard from her in years. The last time I saw her was the funeral. She hugged me stiffly, whispered something that sounded like be smart, but felt like stay small. Then she disappeared into my mother's orbit and never came back. Can you discredit her? I asked. Vanessa exhaled. She was a healthcare proxy at the time. She had access to everything, and she's claiming he confessed it on his deathbed. No paperwork, just verbal. It's weak but not useless. I stood up. My legs were stiff. Then we find the paperwork, I said. We find everything. The next day, I drove to the last place I wanted to go, my father's storage unit. It hadn't been touched since his death. I'd kept the key buried in a drawer all these years. I didn't even know what was still inside, just that it was his. The air inside was stale, the kind that smells like cardboard and old grief. There were boxes labeled in his handwriting, neat, all caps, permanent marker on duct-taped edges. Taxes, photos, vintage tools, and one box that simply read, "For Natalie." My breath caught. It was sealed tight. Inside were documents, letters, his journals, a USB drive, even receipts for the lawyer he hired to draft the trust. But there was more. A printed email. From my mother. If you want to keep the peace, you'll change the terms. You know how emotional she is. Don't let her manipulate you. She's already got enough. If you don't fix this, I will. The date? 2 months before he died. He'd saved it, printed it, filed it under my name, and there, at the bottom of the box, was a single note card in his handwriting. If you're reading this, I guess I didn't make it in time. Don't trust anyone who wants your silence. I sat down right there on the concrete floor and cried for the first time in a long time. Not because I was sad, because I was angry enough to fight harder. I called Vanessa as soon as I got home. Get ready, I said. We're going to bury them in paper. She laughed. Now you're speaking my language. But before I could hang up, she paused. One more thing, she said. You might want to prepare yourself. For what? She hesitated. They filed for public mediation. My jaw clenched. They want to make this public? They're betting on shame. If this goes to mediation, it'll be open session. Reporters can sit in, court records go live. I nodded slowly. Then let them come. I'm not hiding anymore. The notice arrived 2 days later, date, time, location of the mediation hearing. Just above the signature line was a small stamp from the county office. And next to it, a second attorney's name, Julia E. Whitman, ESQ. Aunt Julia wasn't just a witness, she was their lawyer. They chose a mediation room that looked more like a conference center than a courtroom. All cold glass, chrome fixtures, and ceiling lights that buzzed just enough to make you feel like your thoughts weren't safe. Public session. Observers allowed. Which meant 2 things. Reputation was now currency, and lies had shorter expiration dates. Vanessa and I arrived early. She was calm in that way that lawyers can fake. Tailored navy suit, sleek hair, a binder thicker than my high school yearbook. I, on the other hand, was vibrating beneath the surface. Not from fear, from readiness. This wasn't the end, but it was the beginning of the part where they stopped underestimating me. My mother walked in 5 minutes late, which I knew was intentional. Michael trailed behind her in a wrinkled button-up, like he'd just come from sleeping through his own life. And then Julia, Aunt Julia, made her entrance, clipboard in hand, lipstick too dark, expression unreadable. We didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't fake civility for the audience. She walked past me without even blinking. The mediator, a silver-haired man named Carter Hughes, no relation, cleared his throat. Let's begin. They went first. Vanessa had warned me. When you make the first move, you control the narrative. When you go second, you correct it. And sometimes tearing a story apart is more powerful than telling your own. Julia stood. As legal representative for Mrs. Elaine Carter and Mr. Michael Carter, I submit that the original trust in question was altered under emotional distress. We have evidence suggesting that Mr. Robert Carter, the deceased, was suffering from cognitive decline in the final 3 months of his life, rendering him vulnerable to manipulation. She gestured toward me without making eye contact. Furthermore, our witness, as healthcare proxy and longtime family confidant, will testify that the deceased expressed regret over the distribution and wished to revise it. Those revisions were not made in time. She sat, like it was just that simple. Vanessa didn't stand. She just opened the binder slowly and slid a copy of the printed email across the table. Exhibit A, she said. An email from Elaine Carter to Robert Carter, pressuring him to alter the trust to favor her and her son. Dated 2 months prior to his death. The mediator glanced at it. His eyes narrowed. Julia shifted in her seat. We also submit a notarized statement from the estate attorney confirming Robert Carter's mental capacity at the time of the amendment, as well as recorded audio from a meeting with said attorney, stating, verbatim, that his intentions were to leave the majority of his assets to his daughter, Natalie Carter. Vanessa looked up. That's me. Now let's talk about the confidant. They called Julia to the table. She adjusted her glasses like they might block the weight of what was coming. Did Mr. Carter ever verbally express to you a desire to reverse the changes he made to his trust? Vanessa asked. Julia didn't look at me. Yes, he told me he didn't want to cause a rift in the family. And did he ever instruct you to take legal action on his behalf to amend the trust? No. Did you witness any cognitive decline that impaired his decision-making? Silence. I saw stress, grief, but no, nothing official. So your claim rests entirely on an undocumented, unverified conversation. I'm not the only witness, Julia said suddenly, and that's when the door opened. And she walked in. It was Marcy, the live-in nurse who had cared for my father during his final months. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. She'd left quietly after his death, said it was too painful to stay. I didn't know if I would ever hear from her again. She sat next to the mediator without even looking at my mother. Vanessa spoke first. Marcy, did Robert Carter ever express concerns about his wife's behavior regarding the trust? Yes. Can you tell us what he said? He told me he regretted marrying her. The air went still. My mother gasped softly, then smiled. Brittle, sharp. She was just the nurse. Marcy turned her head. He also said you married him for the house, that you kept pushing him to name Michael as successor trustee, that you threatened to cut Natalie off emotionally if he didn't. My mother began, but Vanessa held up a hand. No interruptions. The mediator leaned forward. Miss Carter, do you deny pressuring your husband to reallocate trust assets? I did what was best for my family. And forging documents, was that best too? Objection, Julia snapped. There is no proof of forgery. Vanessa didn't speak. She simply pulled out the scanned deed and highlighted signature analysis from a certified forensic examiner. The signature on this document was traced, she said, over a genuine signature from a car title transfer 3 years earlier. Same pen pressure, same angle, digital overlay confirms. I looked at Julia. Her face didn't change, but her silence screamed. We took a break. I stepped outside and leaned against the courthouse wall, the fall wind biting at my skin. Marcy joined me a moment later. I didn't do this for you, she said. I looked at her. I know. I did it for him. He was kind. He didn't deserve to have his name twisted around like rope. I nodded. Thank you anyway. She lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. Truth has a way of showing up, doesn't care who's ready for it. I watched the smoke curl into the sky, and I let myself breathe, just for a moment, like it didn't all still hurt. Some betrayals wear perfume, others reek of desperation. Michael's smelled like both. 3 days after the mediation, I woke up to 37 unread emails, 4 missed calls from Vanessa, and a certified letter taped to my front door. I didn't need to open any of them to know something had gone sideways. But I did anyway. The email subject line from Vanessa read, He's suing you personally. Michael Carter had filed a civil defamation suit against me, separate from the estate case, claiming I had willfully and maliciously damaged his personal reputation, career opportunities, and emotional well-being. My hands didn't shake. They clenched. It wasn't about money. It was about distraction. If they couldn't beat the facts, they'd try to smear the witness. He's hoping to rattle you, Vanessa said later that morning, pacing her office like a chess master scanning the board. And, she stopped. It's working, for now. I stared at the document. There was something almost laughable about it. Michael, who once cried because a girl broke up with him over text, now claiming emotional trauma because I refused to let him rob me in peace. I want to counter, I said. No. Why not? Because it's bait. If you counter, we open another litigation channel. You'll spend more time defending yourself than fighting the real case. He's not trying to win. He's trying to wear you down. I sat quietly for a moment, then asked, what do we lose if we let this run its course? She met my eyes. Dignity, energy, time. Then we play for time, and I'll handle the rest. That night I called someone I swore I'd never speak to again. His name was Derek. He used to work with Michael, briefly, before their business imploded under Michael's poor management and creative accounting. Derek left with his name intact. Barely. The rest? Not so much. He answered on the second ring. Natalie? Yeah. A pause. Wow, I know. He cleared his throat. So, this isn't a social call. No, it's not, he chuckled. You always got straight to the point. Do you remember that investor meeting you and Michael had with Capital South? Another pause. Vividly. Why? Did Michael ever ask you to falsify any documents? Silence. Then, he tried. I refused. Do you still have your emails? I do. Why? Because he just filed a defamation suit against me. And if I can prove he has a pattern of unethical behavior, I can have the case thrown out as retaliatory. More silence. Then softer. You're really doing this, huh? I'm not the one who started it. I'm just making sure it ends. The next day, Derek forwarded a PDF chain that made my jaw tighten. Michael had asked him to alter investor projections, double the numbers, and backdate a client signature on a mock contract that never closed. Derek had refused. Michael responded by freezing him out and replacing him with someone more flexible. That company lasted 8 months after that. I sent it to Vanessa, who responded with a single line. This is gold. We're moving. But the real gut punch came 2 days later. Not from Michael, from Julia. She sent a settlement offer. It was worded carefully, as if it were generous. If I dropped all charges, they would voluntarily transfer partial ownership of the estate home, allow for a symbolic monetary compensation, and agree to a non-disparagement clause. In short, they'd give me scraps and silence me, permanently. I stared at the paper in disbelief. Vanessa read over my shoulder. They're scared, she said. This offer is panic dressed in legalese. They think I want peace. Vanessa looked at me. You don't? No, I said quietly. I want proof, and I want it public. But that night, alone, sitting in my dark apartment with a printout of my father's handwriting in my lap, the one that said, "Don't trust anyone who wants your silence," I found myself spiraling. What if I was becoming just like them? What if I was chasing justice so hard I couldn't tell where it ended and ego began? I remembered what Marcy said on the courthouse steps. Truth doesn't care who's ready for it. Neither did grief. Neither did legacy. But I did. So I made a decision. One they didn't see coming. The following morning, I walked into the courthouse with a new motion, not to settle, not to escalate, but to open the remainder of my father's estate to full public scrutiny, not just the house, everything, insurance policies, trust transfers, old financials, even records from before he met my mother. If I was going to fight, I was going to fight clean, but I was also going to fight loud. Vanessa looked stunned. Are you sure? This opens the door for them to find your weaknesses too. I nodded. Let them look. I have nothing to hide. Can they say the same? She smiled. No, they can't. It didn't feel like a victory. Not at first. The courtroom was beige and unremarkable, like most places where big things happen quietly. I sat at the same table where I'd spent months listening, watching, calculating. Vanessa beside me, calm, steady, a quiet sword in a sheath. Across from us, Elaine, my mother, dressed in soft gray, like mourning a loss she never claimed. Michael, pale and shrinking in his seat, Julia, expressionless, maybe hollow. The judge called the case to order. We were here for the final ruling. Vanessa stood first. She spoke plainly, without venom. She presented the email trail, the forged signature analysis, the whistleblower documents from Derek, the nurse's testimony, the financial audit from the trust. Each piece dropped like a stone in a still pond. When she finished, the judge turned to them. Julia stood. Her voice was slower than before. We acknowledge the discrepancies, and we respectfully defer to the court's judgment. She sat. That was it. No argument, no defense, just surrender disguised as grace. Then the judge turned to me. Miss Carter, is there anything you'd like to say before judgment is rendered? I didn't plan to speak, but I stood, and I looked at them, not with anger, but with finality. You didn't just steal money, you rewrote history, you turned my grief into a loophole, you taught me that love has limits and trust has terms, and I spent years believing I was too broken to fight back, but I'm not here for revenge. I'm here so the truth has a name. Mine. The judge nodded once. I've heard enough. Judgment was swift. The trust was restored in full to its original terms. Fraud charges were forwarded to the DA. The estate home, mine again, would be held until public record cleared. Michael's personal suit was dismissed, with prejudice. But none of that was what stayed with me. It was the look on her face, my mother's, when she realized I wouldn't gloat, wouldn't smile. I just stood up and walked out. 3 months later, I stood in front of the house. The porch light still flickered. The air still smelled like dust and memory. But I didn't go inside. Instead, I turned and handed the keys to the nonprofit attorney beside me. I want it turned into transitional housing, I said, for women coming out of financial abuse. Call it a trust recovery program. She blinked. You sure? It's legally yours now. I'm sure people ask me if I forgave them. I didn't. But I released them. There's a difference. Forgiveness says you owe me nothing. Release says you can't reach me anymore. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought in courtrooms. They're fought in silence, behind closed doors, within families that were supposed to protect you. I didn't ask to be the strong one. I became her because I had no choice. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You can lose everything. Your trust, your name, your place, and still rebuild. Not just to survive, but to lead, to break cycles, to be the first in your family to say enough. So I'll ask you, have you ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to love you? What would you have done in my place? If this story hit something real inside you, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from or what part of this story stayed with you most. And if you didn't connect with it, let me know why. I'd love to hear your view. If you found this video powerful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real stories that dig deep and speak truth. I've got more coming. Stories that might just change how you see family, loyalty, and yourself.